Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Today was the second round of Tata Steel Vikenze 2023, and the top pairing and the top game we are reviewing today is the game between Vincent Keymer, a young emerging player uh, from Germany, playing against Magnus Carlsen, the world champion of everything. So Magnus is playing black, and this game is in a line of Gruenfeld. So the aim of our analysis of these games is to learn from the games of the Super GM, the opening lines and the opening ideas, and how the Super GM transpose their game from opening to middle game, and then from middle game to the end game. So Vincent Keimer played d4. Magnus replied with knight f6, and Keimer replied with c4, and Magnus surprisingly played g6, and after knight c3, Magnus played Grunfeld. Magnus usually play Grunfeld from the white side, but playing from black side is very rare. Magnus plays some the games I remember, maybe 5 or 6 games that I remember, that Magnus played from the black side of the Grunfeld. One or two was against Vishy Anand in their World Championship match, and a game against Grischuk that was very important theoretical game. So Magnus opted for Grunfeld, and Keimer played knight f3. This, as we know, is the three knight variation of the Grunfeld. So Magnus replied with bishop g7, and instead of going for the exchange variation uh, or going for Russian system, Keimer played bishop to g5. Now this bishop to g5 is with knight f3. So if it was without knight f3, that we have to understand. If the white plays bishop to g5 immediately, this is called Stockholm's variation of Grunfeld, where black usually replied this way, and white can play this move or this move. This is the main line, but white can also play bishop here, and after takes, the black developed the bishop to g7, and then white plays this move, e3. Now I am telling the Stockholm variation because to understand the difference between Stockholm and this Grunfeld, the line that Keimer played. Here, white plays either this or can take at this point, and after castle, white usually takes. We take with the queen, or we take at d4, and then takes. Then we take with the queen. This is the normal Stockholm variation, but uh, here the main line is to take here, and now it transposed. But if white doesn't, or after c5, white doesn't play knight f3 and instead takes, then he's forcing this line of Stockholm. This is the main line Stockholm variation. Now keep this variation in mind, this picture, and come to the game. So instead of going with the Stockholm variation, Keimer played knight f3 first, and after this and bishop g5, Magnus played this move, and Keimer uh, move the bishop to f4. Now I have to take it the c3 square. This knight is here, and if we play c5 now after e3 castle, this is not the normal Stockholm variation. This has transposed to the three knight variation Petrosian system. This is Petrosian system of the three knights. So the presence of this knight will change the middle game course, and this is not like the normal Stockholm. So after takes, the difference is this knight is here. Uh, so this is the Petrosian system. Excuse me. So what actually happened? Magnus took at c3, and then instead of going to the main line, which is c5, this is the main line, and white replies with e3 and black castles. Then after takes, and takes, uh, white reply with bishop e2, and black develop the knight to c6 and white castles, and then bishop to f5. White comes with the queen at a4, and usually the black develop the rook, and the white develop the rook to the c file, and then they exchange the queens, and then white try to maneuver the knight here and develop the bishop to this square, and then after these exchanges, uh, this is the normal end game of the Petrosian system. Instead of going for this line, what Magnus prepared for this game was after takes, instead of playing the main line c5 line, Magnus played c6, and this is a sideline of the Petrosian system. So he's playing Gruenfeld, but not with the normal idea of the Gruenfeld to play c5 and pressurize the center and soften this diagonal for the bishop. So white developed a very good blockade against this bishop, and Magnus played castle, and Keymer replied with queen b3. This is very important move. White has to, if white takes here, all the pressure is released, and the black will be very happy. So white need to keep some tension in the center. Uh, so now he's inviting black to take here, and he will take with the bishop and pressurize this square, pressurize the this square, and hampered the development of bishop. Uh, so Keimer played this way, and Magnus replied with queen a5, pressurizing this c3 pawn and getting a pin over here. So now Keimer played e2 when the bishop lost a tempo from c1 to e2, f1 to e2. Now Magnus takes, and he took with the bishop, and instead of uh, developing the bishop, he developed the knight first, which is uh, a nice idea, you will see later. So black tried to pressurize this area, and but this was also very interesting to uh, pressure this area more, but that was a nice idea by Keimer to pressurize the e7 pawn. So Magnus cannot immediately go rook e1, because the bishop will takes and you will lose your rook. So how you are defending this move is not in the style of a Gruenfeld play. You don't want to give your dark square bishop this much easily. So Magnus immediately attack the bishop. Now you have no time to take here because he will take the bishop with the tempo against the queen, and when the queen takes, then he will move the rook. So Keimer moved the bishop to e2, and now Magnus played rook e8 to defend this pawn. Keimer replied with castle, and Magnus plays this nice move, knight to b6. Now this knight is covering this point, this point, this point, and the bishop is free for development. So as when you are playing as a black, you have to be careful to develop your pieces as soon as possible. Here Keimer tried e5, which I don't like. Uh, uh, when you were opting for e4, you could have played early in the game. First you played e3, now e4, and you are softening this diagonal. Instead, you could have played a3, and this a3 will be a very nice move, and then you can develop your pieces towards the center. Anyhow, uh, he played e5, and Magnus developed the bishop to e6 square, gaining a tempo against the queen. And when the queen moves, he immediately played c5. Now he's because the pawn is at e4. Now he's targeting c3 pawn and softening this diagonal and opening this diagonal for the bishop. So Keimer move pawn to d5, and Magnus develop the bishop to g4 square. And now this pawn is hanging. So Keimer try to save it with the bishop, but you are losing your pressure. You are undeveloping your developed pieces. So Magnus immediately attack here because uh, he want to clarify the center, and Keimer attack here because this bishop is here. So he's pressurizing the b5 pawn, but Magnus block the bishop by playing c4 square, c4. Now this pawn can't move. This discovery is not possible. This bishop is blunted. White has now some cramped position, so black is already better out of the opening. So look how Magnus get a small advantage of space and hampered the movement of white pieces. So now white took at this e6 square, and Magnus took with the rook correctly, pressurizing this pawn. Uh, so Keimer played knight to d4, and now he's attacking the rook, but Magnus has to first solve this problem. Now he cannot take here because after taking the rook, this bishop is not attacked by anything, and this bishop is coming here, and black is completely winning. So you have to take the bishop first, and now uh, Magnus once again protected this way because the first move that come to the mind instead of playing this is rook to d6, and after this you can as this square is attacked, uh, takes, you can take this pawn, but you lose this pawn, and you lost this pawn as well, and now Magnus is 5 pawns against 4 pawns. uh, So that was one line that but Magnus, uh, instead of giving this pawn so easily, he first, sorry, he first protected this with a6, and now after this move he came back, the rook came back to e8, and now after rook e1 he developed the knight. He's trying to occupy this square with the knight. So he took a tempo. The Keymer moved the knight with the tempo. So now the knight occupied this nice b5 square. But Magnus was not worried, and he's aiming here. He will first remove your knight from the square and then try to occupy there. But Keymer sensed the idea and he moved the knight to another tempo. Now he played bishop to g5, trying to exploit this square, getting a exchange, but Magnus was ready to give this exchange. He took the pawn, and now after check he gave the exchange and took another pawn. So Magnus give exchange, but he took two pawns with a minor piece. Uh, that is how Super GM plays, and the game is completely winning. How can you stop these three connected pawns with the help of this bishop, with the help of knight and queen? So Keimer, rook was under attack. He moved the rook to c1, and Magnus start developing the queen side pawns and progressing them. So Keimer moved the rook bishop to g5, and now Magnus pushed even more b4, and now Keimer attacked the knight, uh, and Magnus rotated the rook to d8. And now after this move, which is attacking on the king side to just get somehow any counterplay, because the black pawns are moving up, and Magnus is a master of these slow maneuvering end games. So he's trying to get some counterplay on the king side, and meanwhile he's also creating some luft for the king. So here Magnus played this rook to uh, d3, and after this move he took the pawn, uh, and after the Keimer take at c3 square, Magnus took with the bishop and gaining a tempo against the rook. So Keimer moved the king here, but Magnus was not interested. Uh, to uh, blunder his rook like this, because the Keimer will be taking the rook. So Magnus moved the queen to a very nice square, and after this check there is no more checks, and black is in a very uh, developed and active state. Here Keimer played rook to e3. Uh, if the Magnus move the rook from this file, then this check will be uh, a major threat. So Magnus created a square for his king here and protected this square as well. And Keimer played this move, queen to uh, e4. And here, after a thought, Magnus took the queen, although this would be even brilliant move. Immediately the game would have been decided. uh, After this move, takes, takes, Magnus would be having five pawns against three pawns in a rook end game, which would be easily winning like this. And but Magnus opted for another. Uh, he took the queen. Now this pawn is weak, so this move was better because this pawn would have been safe in that line, but he progressed the b pawn to b3, and he took the pawn at a2, and after this he took the exchange. Now Magnus has four pawns against two pawns, which is simply winning for Magnus. He is a master of such endgames. He first protected this pawn and then develop his king, and then try to rotate the king to that side. Then he moved the rook uh, to f file because he wants this king to remain here, not to go to the this side, because this pawn will be hanging. So Keymer moved the pawn, and Magnus tried to activate the king, but the Keymer stopped that. Then Magnus give a check and then protected the f7 pawn, and then Magnus start rotating the king to the king side back, and then I take this pawn. The Keymer is forced to protect by the rook, and Magnus again block the king uh, to get into to the king side again, and now he's slowly progressing. Now Keymer moved the pawn to g3, and Magnus attacked it immediately. Keymer tried to activate his king towards the king side, but he lost another pawn and gain a pawn on the queen side. But now these two are passed pawns, so Magnus pushed the passed pawn immediately and get a very safe square for his king on the h5 square. And after few moves, there is no way for white to stop this pawn, and here Keymer resigned because uh, the game will progress like this, and Magnus will save this pawn, then move the rook here or here, and then play this pawn up, and there is no way to stop. So a brilliant victory for Magnus in this Gruenfeld structure, in Gruenfeld opening, and let's see, he's 1.5 in 2 rounds. So let's see what happens in the remaining 11 rounds. Please like and subscribe, and thank you and good night.